Today is February 5th, and we're going to talk about material attachments. You know what those are. I know what those are. We all know what those are. Material attachments offer us no benefits. They are clearly impediments on the path of bhakti. They only keep us further away from Krishna. So why did I write this? This is obvious, this is simple, this is ABC spirituality, but there's a reason I wrote this. The reason I wrote this is because we are attached to the impediments to bhakti. Now I know that sounds strange or paradoxical. Material attachments, I say here, offer us no benefit, they're impediments. Why would we be attached to something that offers us no benefits? Because those attachments bring us pleasure. That's why we're attached to anything. We're not attached to something that doesn't bring us pleasure. In fact, Patanjali explained the psychology of attachment by saying that anything that brings you pleasure is something that you become attached to. Anything that brings you displeasure is something you become detached from. So that's why material attachments, even though they're impediments, even though there's no benefit, they exist, and we tend to see them in somewhat of a positive way because they brought us pleasure in the past, or we've thought that they brought us pleasure in the past. And because they brought us pleasure in the past, we believe they're going to bring us pleasure now. And that's why we're attached. So what do we do? Now you might be thinking, well, I understand this intellectually, but because it brought me pleasure, I'm attached to it. So how do I deal with it? How do I overcome it? Well, understanding that we become detached from things that don't bring us pleasure, and we become attached to things that do bring us pleasure, if we can associate a little bit of displeasure with what we're presently attached to, and perhaps sometimes associate pleasure with things like austerity, or associate pleasure with detachment from the things that I'm attached to, we can switch around the equation. So now think of something that you're attached to that is not good for your Krishna consciousness, something that you'd like to be detached from. Now, in thinking of that, think of the consequences of that attachment, the negative consequences, how it's harmful, how if I maintain this attachment, it produces negative results. And ultimately, it doesn't make me happy. What you're trying to do is associate something more negative with a material attachment, because if there's enough a negative association with it, it starts to become less attractive, and that material attachment starts to loosen and wane. If you come to a point where you have enough negative associations towards something, it's much, much easier to let it go, to give it up. Of course, we know that ultimately we give up when we get a taste. But until we get a taste, we have to be able to detach ourselves, not just mentally by understanding it's bad, but also feeling it's bad. So by associating negative experiences, negative thoughts, and bringing that to the feeling level, then when we think about this attachment, if we start feeling some negativity towards it, then we can become attached. Because the reason we're attached is because we have positive feelings, not just thoughts, but positive feelings. And this is very important to understand. It's how you feel about something that causes you to be detached or attached. So if I know something is bad, it may not be enough because I know it's bad, but I don't feel like it's bad enough that I don't like it. Okay, I understand it's bad, but I like doing it. It makes me feel good. So we want to come to the point where we start feeling a bit negative about the things that are not good for us. So through the process of looking at those things, how they play out in our life, how our future will look, if we remain attached to those things, we should gradually try as best we can to associate some negatives to the point that we start feeling negative about that and feeling positive about giving it up. That's in this stage that we're in before there's high levels of taste, that's how we can become detached. It's not just the thinking, that's the point, it's also the feeling. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.